10 quick tips to make you a better producer and mixer. Let's get straight into it. Number 1, use high quality samples, presets, and starting materials. So this one's super important because it is much easier to make something sound good if it already started sounding good, rather than trying to make something that sounds bad sound good with a lot of processing. The saying, you can't polish a turd, comes to mind. So use good high quality samples and preset. If you're using good quality starting materials, then you spend less time trying to make them sound good because they already do sound good, rather than to fix and refine a bad sound. You're molding a good sound. There's a subtle difference here, but this is so vital. And things to look out for good quality samples and presets are: for samples, are they key labeled? Are they BPM labeled? Generally a good sign of attention to detail. With presets, do they have macros set? Another good sign. If they have multiple macros, like on Serum, this patch here, look at the bottom left, there are 4 macros that I can play with over time, which have been expertly mapped. A good sign of attention to detail from your preset providers. Use genre-specific presets. Don't try use a hip-hop sample in a techno track. It can sound cool, but it's not going to work too well most of the time. Use techno samples in techno tracks. Use drum and bass samples in drum and bass tracks. Use the right starting material. Make sure it's high quality. Tip number 2 is to work quickly, efficiently, and effectively. If you're spending multiple hours tweaking a sound, that was probably okay to start with. The chances are you've lost your objectivity and you're just getting attached to the sound and making it worse when it sounded good to start with. If you can't get it to sound good after 5 or 10 minutes of tweaking, then maybe it's the wrong sound, maybe it's not right for the project, and you need to move on to another sound or start working on something else. Try to keep things down to 5 to 10 minutes for each part. If you're working on something in isolation for more than 5 minutes, move on. I appreciate that if you're a beginner, it might take you longer to do things. Try not to be spending half an hour, 2 hours EQing a snare, which doesn't even really matter. Which moves me nicely on to the next point, number 3. Think about the bigger picture. So if you're working on one sound in isolation, in solo, and you're trying to get it to sound perfect, great. But that is just one sound. Most tracks consist of multiple sounds. Well, I'd say all tracks should consist of multiple different sounds. A snare is just one part of the drums. Does that snare work with the rest of the drums? Does that snare work with the bass? Does it work with the vocals? All of these things are something you have to think about. Do things in context, at least of similar instruments. So if you're working on the snare, work on it a little bit in isolation to remove any problems that might be arising. There might be resonant frequencies, all sorts of stuff. We'll cover that in another video, but check it out in isolation, but then think, how does it sit in context of the rest of the drums? How do the drums then sit in context with the bass, with the vocals, with everything? It's all about the bigger picture. Something that might sound a bit counterintuitive, some parts might not sound good in isolation, but they sound good in context of everything else. Because remember, the listener is listening to a full track, not just this one snare. And even if that one snare isn't perfect on its own, the rest of the track will build it up. Moving on to tip number 4, use reference tracks. So these are super important. Bring a well-produced track of the genre that you produce into your project and use it as a reference. Ask yourself questions like, what instruments have they used? How do the instruments work together? Are these instruments changing over time, or are they staying the same? Listen critically and analytically to the sonic balance, the mix, but also the arrangement. You could bring in a track to your project and copy the arrangement. I'm not saying copy the sounds, but you can apply the same arrangement techniques and concepts to your track. For example, if the bass comes in 30 seconds in and then filters in slowly and then comes up to a big climax and there's a drum fill, then it drops, you can use that same principle using your sounds and what you've got written down. Use reference tracks is a good way to gauge where you're at and what it sounds like compared to a professional commercial release, but also it helps you get better by thinking critically and analytically about what you have. References are also really good for mastering and mixing. Number 5 is to learn music theory. So music theory can speed up the process of pretty much everything in the production process, from the writing phase to the production phase to the mixing phase. If you know the rules and why things work, then it's easier to play the game rather than doing random experimentation and hoping for the best, especially with writing chords, writing melodies, even mixing. Everything sounds good for a reason. So if you understand these reasons, it's much quicker to get your ideas down into the door, ideas that will sound better, more professional, and will be easier to play with because they follow the rules. And this is all based on physics. Music is applied science. You don't need to know the nitty-gritty science behind it, but just knowing the rules is very useful. I have a few videos of music theory you can watch right up here in the top. I'd highly recommend if you're just getting started out, but having some knowledge is better than no knowledge, and you will thank yourself. And moving on to tip number 6, this is also a theory point: tuning your drums to the key of the track. So important. Most drums have a tone to them. They're not just an impact in most cases. A kick drum has a fundamental frequency, so does a snare drum, so do tom drums, some cymbals do as well. So tuning these to the key of your track is so important if you want them to mix together well. Typically kicks, you want to tune to the root note or the fifth. These tend to work the best. I'd recommend the root note. The rest of the drums, you can tune to the root note, the third, the fifth, sometimes even the seventh, whatever you want. Some work better than others. First and fifth work the best. Third is sometimes quite nice to throw in there. But as long as everything is in key, it will sound so much better and will be easier to mix together. Number 7. This is an important one. This is to work with intention. So if you don't know why you're doing something and you can't put into words, this is why I'm adding this effect, probably shouldn't be doing it. Everything you do should be with intention. If you're going to add a certain effect to a sound, whether that's distortion, saturation, reverb, why are you doing this? What is the reason? Is it because you don't know what to do and think it might be cool? Do you have a reason? But why? Why would that make that sound better? Think about it this way. Are you adding echo and reverb to add more depth, to smear out the sound? Is that the intention? Or are you just adding it for the sake of it because you add reverb to all of your tracks? Something to think about. Whenever you're doing something, do it with intention. Are you adding a compressor to a sound? Why am I compressing this? Is it because I add a compressor to everything, so I need to compress this sound? That's the wrong answer. You should be, this sound isn't punchy enough, so I'm adding a compressor to make it more punchy. We're going to do a full video on compression, but this is the kind of thinking that you should have, so you're not wasting time doing pointless stuff that doesn't really make any impact. I'm not saying don't experiment with stuff, but have an intention. Say, I am going to experiment with this plugin to see if I can come up with something cool that I haven't tried before, rather than just, as they say, throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. Have experimentation time, but also have intention to everything you do. Number 8, this is a very important one: educate yourself. So if you're still watching this video, this is a good sign. You are investing in your education by taking the time to learn more about music. And the more you know, the better your music will be. And education comes in many forms. You can watch tutorials, you can have structured learning courses, you can do all sorts, or even just listening to music analytically. Rather than, say, listening music to enjoy it, which music should be enjoyed, of course, listen to what some of your favorite songs are doing, like what happens in this, analyze the arrangement. All this kind of stuff can take you to the next level if you're thinking critically about music, but also thinking about how you can apply techniques in other genres to your own. There's a lot of great information out there. A lot of it is free. There's a lot of great free resources out there, such as on YouTube channels. There's some great Reddit forums. There's websites you can go to, all of the above, but these tend to be quite unstructured. When you realize that you don't know what you don't know and how much there is that you don't know, it's almost impossible to search for the answer for something that you don't even know what the question is. So having structure can help, whether this is in a course, a program, or a series of videos. Having structure can really help. It's easy to follow, be consistent. Speaking of, number 9, this is an important one. Be consistent. So if you want to take your music to the next level, then show up every day, or at least as much as you possibly can. I appreciate that some of you might have busy jobs, you might have families, you might have kids, you might have lots of things going on. But you can always find time for music, and showing up as much as you can dedicate to music. Show up, put in some time, and you will get better. You learn by doing, and you learn the most by finishing a track. So try get your tracks finished. Don't just make a bunch of loops. You need to do the full process. And even if you only have 10-20 minutes a day to work on it, maybe you've got an hour a day that you could work on music. Maybe you could watch one less episode on Netflix. Maybe you could wake up an hour earlier or go to bed an hour later so that you can spend your time productively working on music. This is key. Consistency will get you results, not just make you a better producer, but when you start releasing music, releasing consistent music is what people want. If you do one release a year, then people might forget about you. But if you're doing multiple, maybe 5, 6, 10, 20 releases a year, you'll keep relevant. Consistency is key for anything, but especially music. And finally, number 10, this one is super important, is find a community and find a mentor that can help you. So when I started out, I didn't know anybody in the music industry because I came from university in engineering. No one I knew produced music. I was on my own. I didn't really know what I was doing. I looked on YouTube videos to try and find some structure. There was no structure, and I didn't know anyone personally that could help me get my production to the next level. Truth be told, I reached out to a random YouTube channel which had really good music on and just asked them like, hey, I've been working on music. I'm a complete beginner, but I don't know anything. I don't know anyone in this industry. I'm just starting out. I really love your channel. All the music on there is great, and I want to make music like this. I know I've got a long way to go, but I don't suppose you could listen to my music and give me some pointers, and maybe if you know anyone that can help, you can point me in the right direction. And most people are willing to help you. This channel, they responded back to me, gave me some really nice advice, and gave me some resources to go check out. From that, I met other people who I could collaborate with and trust in their judgment. And having this support community around you can not only inspire you, it will keep you accountable to keep on working, but also hold you to a higher standard. Having this community and someone you can trust is very important, but particularly if you have someone who's maybe a few steps ahead of you or even doing it professionally, to give you guidance and advice on where you are right now and how to get to where you want to be, whatever that might be, whatever that might look like for you. Having someone who has had that experience and knows what they're talking about is vital. It can save you so much time trying to learn stuff without any structure. Having that in-depth critical feedback on your music is so valuable, especially from someone who knows what they're talking about and has the technical knowledge. Because I remember I used to send all my music to my friends initially, and because they're my friends, they don't know much about music production. They couldn't tell me anything that was actually useful for me to get better. They would say, oh yeah, I like it. They didn't really like it, but they were my friends, so they try not to hurt my feelings. But even as I got much better at production, and they actually did like the song too, wow, this is amazing, I really like it. Like, well, what do you like about it? They can't say specifics, and particularly they can't say specifics on how it could be better. And especially if they don't have technical knowledge, they can't tell you what needs to be done to fix the track. They might say it's really good and be genuine and want to listen to it, but if there is a problem, A, they're probably not going to be able to hear it, B, they probably won't be able to articulate it, and C, they won't have the technical knowledge to explain it. Case in point, you could send your track, which is really good, to one of your friends without technical knowledge, and there could be a huge problem in the low end. They wouldn't be able to tell you. You have a massive buildup in frequencies in the 150 to 300 hertz range. You need to use a Bell EQ filter to fix this problem, especially on the bass, especially on the kick. Technical feedback like that is important, and you're not going to get that from friends. So you need a mentor that can help you with this and give you the advice, the hard-hitting objective truth that you need to make your music better. Final bonus point, number 11, there was only meant to be 10, but I was feeling generous, would to be, don't take things personally and have thick skin, and be willing to improve. Be self-aware. If you're just starting out, I know you're probably very proud of the music you're making, but if you're a beginner, if you've only got 1 year of experience, then realistically, your music probably isn't sounding professional yet. And I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. You need more experience. And if someone critiques your track and tells you problems with it, be open to that and want to get better and take on board what they're saying, especially if you trust this person's judgment. Don't trust someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, but if someone says you have a problem in your low end, don't get annoyed. Be like, okay, yeah, maybe I do have a problem in the low end. This is something I need to get better at, and work on getting better at that. Don't take it personally. Everyone starts somewhere, and no one knows what they're doing to start with, but with the right guidance, with the right feedback, and if you're taking this feedback well, rather than getting offended and getting annoyed that you thought your track was perfect when it wasn't, and someone actually told you some useful advice, don't take that personally. Someone that can give you good advice will give you constructive criticism. They will tell you the problem, but tell you how to fix it. Much like I said in the previous example, that's the kind of feedback you want. But don't get annoyed that I said you had a problem. I told you how to fix it. Go fix it. Go learn. Go be better and hold yourself to a higher standard, and you will get where you want to be. Hope you liked the video. Do like and subscribe. And if you want a mentor, I am mentoring people on a 3-month program where we learn how to make professional sounding music. If you want more details, drop a comment below. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video.